The hunger clawed at Tessa Morgan's empty stomach as she curled against the rough wooden steps behind Finley's general store, her threadbare shawl offering little protection against the chilly Arizona evening. It was 1878, and the mining town of Silver Creek had given her nothing but hardship since she'd arrived 3 weeks ago. Tessa hadn't meant to fall asleep, but exhaustion had claimed her, the product of 3 days without proper rest and nearly 2 without food. The position at the boarding house had fallen through upon her arrival, filled by the owner's niece from back east, leaving her stranded in an unfamiliar town with dwindling resources and no connections. The sound of approaching boots stirred her from her fitful slumber. Tessa's eyes flew open, her heart racing as she instinctively pressed herself against the wall, making herself smaller. In a town like Silver Creek, being discovered alone and vulnerable could lead to dangers she didn't care to contemplate. She held her breath as the footsteps paused nearby. Through half-lidded eyes, she watched a tall figure bend down, placing something on the step beside her. The stranger lingered for a moment, then walked away, spurs jingling softly with each step. When the sound had faded completely, Tessa cautiously sat up. There on the weathered wooden step lay a cloth-wrapped bundle of fresh bread, still warm enough that she could feel it through the fabric, along with a small wedge of cheese and an apple. Her hands trembled as she reached for the unexpected bounty. Who would show such kindness to a stranger, and why? She glanced around, but saw no sign of her mysterious benefactor. Despite her hunger, she forced herself to eat slowly, savoring each bite of the crusty bread and sharp cheese. The apple she tucked into her pocket for later. It had been so long since she'd had fresh fruit. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of pink and gold, Tessa made a decision. She would find work today, no matter what, and somehow she would find a way to thank the stranger who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. Silver Creek came to life as the sun rose higher, storekeepers unlocking their doors, miners heading to the hills, and women setting up market stalls. Tessa straightened her dress as best she could and pinned her chestnut hair into a semblance of order. She had precious little, but her mother had always taught her that dignity cost nothing. She was inquiring about work at the town's small hotel when she first saw him, tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy hair beneath a well-worn hat. He moved with an easy confidence as he led his dappled gray horse down the street. Something about the set of his shoulders seemed familiar, and Tessa found herself watching him until he disappeared into the livery stable. "Miss, did you hear what I said?" The hotel manager's impatient voice snapped her attention back. "I'm sorry, sir. You were saying there's no position available at present." "That's right. Maybe try the Silver Palace Saloon. They're usually hiring girls." His tone made it clear what kind of work he meant. "Thank you, but I'll try elsewhere," Tessa replied stiffly, turning away before he could see her dismay. By midday, she had been turned away from every respectable establishment in town. Her feet ached, and desperation was beginning to set in when she noticed a neatly lettered sign in the window of a small dress shop. "Seamstress wanted." Hope fluttered in her chest. If there was one thing Tessa knew, it was sewing. Her mother had been a dressmaker back in St. Louis, and Tessa had learned the trade at her side from childhood. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. A plump, gray-haired woman looked up from behind a counter covered with fabric samples. "Good afternoon," Tessa said, summoning her courage. "I've come about the position." The woman eyed her critically. "You have experience, I hope. I need someone who knows their way around a needle." "Yes, madam. My mother was a dressmaker. I can sew anything from everyday wear to wedding gowns." "We'll see. I'm Martha Holloway. Come on back and show me what you can do." For the next hour, Tessa demonstrated her skills, fingers flying as she worked on a complex embroidery pattern. Mrs. Holloway watched closely, occasionally nodding in approval. "Well," she said finally, "you certainly know your stitches. The position pays $15 a month, plus room and board above the shop. I need someone reliable who won't run off the moment some cowboy comes calling. I assure you, Mrs. Holloway, I have no interest in cowboys or any other men." The memory of her brief, disastrous marriage was still too fresh. "Good. You can start tomorrow. There's a room upstairs, small but clean. What's your name, girl?" "Tessa Morgan, madam, and thank you. You won't regret hiring me." That evening, sitting on the narrow bed in her new room, Tessa ate the apple from that morning, reflecting on her change of fortune. She still wondered about the stranger who had left her the bread. Would she ever get the chance to thank him? The answer came sooner than she expected. The following day, while delivering a mended dress to the post office, she nearly collided with a man exiting the building. "Pardon me, miss," he said, steadying her with gentle hands on her shoulders. Looking up, Tessa found herself staring into the clearest blue eyes she had ever seen. It was the man from the day before, the one with the dappled gray horse. Up close, she could see the weathered tan of his face and the fine lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He wore simple clothes, a blue shirt, leather vest, and worn denim pants, but they were clean and well kept. "No harm done," she managed to say, though her heart was suddenly racing. There was something familiar about him beyond just seeing him on the street. He tipped his hat politely, but as he turned to leave, recognition dawned. The breadth of his shoulders, the distinctive way he moved, he was her mysterious benefactor. "Wait," she called out impulsively. "Was it you? The other night behind Finley's store?" He turned back, studying her face for a long moment before nodding slowly. "You looked like you could use a meal." "Thank you, I don't know what I would have done if—" She trailed off, embarrassed by the emotion welling in her throat. "No need for thanks, anyone would have done the same." "No," Tessa said firmly, "they wouldn't, and I'm grateful." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I'm Sam Turner, ranch foreman at the R just outside town. Tessa Morgan, I work for Mrs. Holloway now at the dress shop. Glad to hear it." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Well, Miss Morgan, I should be getting back to the ranch. Of course. Thank you again, Mr. Turner." As he walked away, Tessa couldn't help but watch him go, wondering why her heart was still beating so quickly. Over the next few weeks, Tessa settled into her new life in Silver Creek. Mrs. Holloway was demanding but fair, and the work suited her. She even began to make friends: Jenny, the baker's daughter, and Ida, who taught at the one-room schoolhouse. She saw Sam Turner occasionally when he came to town for supplies. He always tipped his hat politely, sometimes stopping for a brief conversation. Tessa told herself the flutter in her stomach whenever she spotted him riding down the main street was nothing more than gratitude. One afternoon in late October, the shop bell jingled, and Tessa looked up from the wedding dress she was altering to find Sam standing awkwardly by the door, hat in hand. "Mr. Turner," she said, setting aside her work, "what brings you to the dress shop? Surely not a new Sunday suit?" He smiled at that. "No, madam. Actually, I came to see if you might be free this Sunday afternoon, for a picnic, perhaps. The weather's fine and there's a nice spot by the creek." The invitation caught Tessa completely off guard. "A picnic with me?" "If you'd like to," he said, his confidence faltering slightly at her surprise. "If it's not proper, I understand." Tessa hesitated. Since her disastrous marriage to William, she had sworn off men entirely. And yet, there was something about Sam Turner that inspired trust rather than fear. "I think I would enjoy that," she found herself saying. "Thank you." His smile brightened the entire shop. "I'll come by at 1 o'clock if that suits you." "It does. I'll look forward to it." After he left, Tessa leaned against the counter, wondering what had possessed her to accept. "Mrs. Holloway emerged from the back room, eyebrows raised. "Well, well, seems you're not as disinterested in cowboys as you claimed." Tessa felt her cheeks grow warm. "He's just being kind. He helped me when I first arrived in town." "Sam Turner is a good man," Mrs. Holloway said, nodding approvingly. "One of the few genuine ones around these parts. His father built that ranch from nothing, and Sam's doubled its size since taking over. Plenty of girls have set their caps for him, but he's always been too busy for courting." "We're not courting," Tessa protested. "It's just a picnic." Mrs. Holloway merely smiled knowingly and returned to her ledgers. Sunday arrived clear and mild, a perfect autumn day. Tessa dressed with care in her best blue dress, arranging her hair in a simple but becoming style. At precisely 1 o'clock, there was a knock at the shop door. Sam stood outside, looking freshly shaved and somewhat nervous, a picnic basket in one hand. He had traded his work clothes for clean trousers and a white shirt with a string tie. "You look lovely, Miss Morgan," he said, the sincerity in his voice making her blush. "Thank you. And please call me Tessa." "Tessa," he repeated, smiling. "Shall we?" They walked through town, ignoring the curious glances of townspeople unaccustomed to seeing the quiet seamstress in the company of the R foreman. Sam led her to where 2 horses waited, his dappled gray and a gentle-looking chestnut mare. "I hope you ride," he said. "The spot I want to show you is a bit of a distance." "It's been some time," Tessa admitted, "but I used to ride often as a girl." With Sam's steadying hand, she mounted the mare, adjusting her skirts as best she could. Soon they were trotting out of town, following a winding trail that led into the foothills. As they rode, Sam pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the area. He had a pleasant way of speaking, thoughtful and sometimes humorous, without the boastfulness she had come to expect from men. After about 40 minutes, they came to a small, clear stream lined with cottonwood trees, their leaves golden in the autumn light. A grassy clearing nearby provided the perfect spot for their picnic. "This is beautiful," Tessa said as Sam helped her dismount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "My mother used to bring me here as a boy," he told her, spreading a blanket in the shade of the largest cottonwood. She said it was the prettiest spot in the territory. She was right. The picnic basket revealed a feast: fried chicken, biscuits, apple tarts, and a jar of lemonade. As they ate, conversation flowed more easily than Tessa had expected. "How did you come to Silver Creek?" Sam asked as they finished the meal. "It's not exactly on the way to anywhere." Tessa hesitated, unused to sharing her past, but something about Sam's open expression encouraged trust. "I was heading to California, to my cousin in Sacramento," she explained, "but I ran out of money in Silver Creek. The stage fare kept increasing at every stop, and by the time I reached here, I couldn't afford to go further." "That's a long way from where?" St. Louis. She toyed with a blade of grass, avoiding his eyes. "My husband died last year. There was nothing left for me there." It wasn't the complete truth, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. William had indeed died, shot by a jealous husband after one of his many infidelities. What she omitted was the relief she had felt at his passing, and the shame that had followed her when the scandal became public. "I'm sorry," Sam said softly. "About your husband, don't be." The words came out sharper than she intended. We weren't happy." Sam nodded, asking no further questions, for which Tessa was grateful. "What about you?" she asked, changing the subject. "Have you always lived here?" "Born and raised on the R. My father came west after the war, looking for a fresh start. Met my mother, who was traveling with her family to Oregon. The story goes that he took one look at her and told the wagon master he was going no further. Sam smiled at the memory. They built the ranch together. When they passed fever 5 years back, it fell to me to keep it going. No brothers or sisters. A sister, Emma. She's back east, married to a banker in Boston. Visits every few years, but city life suits her better than the territory. He leaned back on his elbows, looking out over the stream. I can't imagine living anywhere else, though. This land gets in your blood. The warmth in his voice when he spoke of his home touched something in Tessa. It had been so long since she had felt that kind of belonging anywhere. As the afternoon waned, they walked along the stream, Sam pointing out tracks of deer and other wildlife. When they returned to the horses, Tessa found herself reluctant for the day to end. "Thank you for this," she said as he helped her mount. "It's been peaceful." "I'm glad you came," he replied, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. The ride back to town was quieter, each lost in their own thoughts. As they reached the dress shop, the setting sun painted the buildings in hues of gold and pink. "Would you allow me to call on you again?" Sam asked as he helped her down from the mare. Tessa knew she should refuse. Getting involved with any man, even one as seemingly decent as Sam Turner, was a risk she had promised herself she wouldn't take again. And yet, "I would like that," she heard herself say. His smile was worth the risk, she decided. In the weeks that followed, Sam became a regular visitor to the dress shop. Sometimes he brought small gifts, wildflowers he had picked on the range, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy, or candy from the mercantile. Other times, he simply came to talk, sitting on the chair by the counter while Tessa worked, telling her about his day on the ranch or asking about hers at the shop. Mrs. Holloway observed their growing friendship with a knowing smile, but made no comment beyond an occasional, "That Sam Turner is a good man," whenever he left. As November turned to December, Silver Creek transformed with holiday decorations and a dusting of snow on the surrounding hills. The dress shop bustled with orders for Christmas finery, keeping Tessa busy from dawn until well after dusk most days. One evening, as she worked late finishing a ball gown for the mayor's wife, there was a knock at the shop door. Tessa opened it to find Sam standing there, snowflakes melting on his hat and shoulders. "I'm sorry to disturb you so late," he said, "but I've just heard that the Christmas social at the church has been moved up a week due to Reverend Miller's travel plans. It's this Saturday now." "Oh," Tessa said, puzzled by his urgency. "Thank you for letting me know. What I mean to say is," he continued, seeming uncharacteristically nervous, "would you do me the honor of attending with me? As my guest." The invitation touched her deeply. She hadn't attended any social functions since arriving in Silver Creek, always using work as an excuse to avoid them. The truth was, she had been afraid of the questions, the scrutiny that might come from being new and alone. "I would be delighted," she said softly. His face lit up with a smile that warmed her more than any fire could have. "Wonderful. I'll call for you at 6 on Saturday." As he turned to go, she impulsively caught his hand. "Sam, wait. Would you? Would you like to come in for some coffee? It's cold out and I have a pot on the stove." He looked surprised but pleased. "I'd like that very much." They sat at the small table in the back of the shop, steam rising from their cups as the snow fell silently outside the window. The intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on Tessa, the two of them alone in the warm circle of lamplight while the rest of the world slept. "Tell me about your dreams," Sam said suddenly. Before life took its turns, what did young Tessa Morgan want to be? The question caught her off guard. It had been so long since anyone had cared about her dreams. William certainly never had. "I wanted to have my own dress shop," she admitted, "like my mother did, to create beautiful things that made women feel special on their important days." And now, she stared into her cup, considering. Now I think I just want peace, a quiet life without fear or uncertainty." "Is that all?" he asked gently. Looking up, she met his gaze, so earnest and kind. "Perhaps not. Perhaps I'm starting to want more." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibility. Finally, Sam set down his cup. "I should go. It's late and you need your rest." He stood, reaching for his hat. "Thank you for the coffee." "Thank you for thinking of me," Tessa replied, walking him to the door. He paused in the doorway, snowflakes swirling around him. "I think of little else these days, Tessa Morgan." Before she could respond, he was gone, a dark figure against the snowy street. The night of the Christmas social arrived crisp and clear, stars glittering overhead like diamonds on black velvet. Tessa had made herself a new dress for the occasion, deep green wool with satin trim, simple but elegant. Mrs. Holloway had insisted on lending her a cameo brooch to complete the ensemble. "You look like Christmas itself," Sam said when he arrived to escort her, his eyes warm with admiration. The church hall had been transformed with evergreen boughs, red ribbons, and dozens of candles. It seemed the entire town had turned out for the event, the room buzzing with conversation and laughter. As they entered, Tessa felt the weight of curious stares. Although she had been in Silver Creek for months now, her tendency to keep to herself meant many still viewed her as a stranger. "Nervous?" Sam asked quietly, noticing her tension. "A little," she admitted. "I haven't been to something like this in a very long time." "Just remember, you're with me," he said, offering his arm. "And there's not a person here who would dare say an unkind word about anyone under my protection." The confidence in his voice steadied her. Together, they made their way through the crowd, Sam introducing her to ranchers, townspeople, and their families. To Tessa's surprise, she was met with genuine warmth, especially from the women who frequented the dress shop. After dinner came dancing, the local fiddle player striking up lively tunes that soon had the floor crowded with couples. Sam led Tessa out for a waltz, his hand warm and steady at her waist. "I should warn you," he said with a smile, "I'm no dancer. My mother tried to teach me, but I fear I was a hopeless student." "I'm sure you'll manage just fine," Tessa replied, returning his smile. Despite his warning, Sam moved with natural grace, guiding her smoothly around the floor. As they danced, Tessa became aware of a growing feeling in her chest, a lightness, a happiness she had almost forgotten was possible. "You're smiling," Sam observed, his voice soft. "It suits you." "I'm happy," she said simply. "Tonight, in this moment, I'm truly happy." The look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Tessa," whatever he had been about to say was interrupted as the music ended, and Reverend Miller called for everyone's attention to announce the Christmas pageant rehearsal schedule. Later, as the evening drew to a close, Sam walked Tessa back to the dress shop, the night silent except for the crunch of snow beneath their boots. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," Tessa said as they reached her door. "I can't remember when I've enjoyed myself more." "The pleasure was mine," Sam replied. He hesitated, then took her hand in his. "Tessa, I've been meaning to ask. Would you join me for Christmas dinner at the ranch? It's nothing fancy, just me and a few of the hands who don't have family nearby, but I'd be honored if you'd come." The invitation touched her deeply. The thought of spending Christmas alone had been weighing on her mind. "I would love to," she said softly. His face brightened with a smile. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Good night, Tessa Morgan," he whispered. "Good night, Sam Turner," she replied, her cheek tingling where his lips had touched. As she watched him walk away, Tessa realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love with the quiet cowboy who had once left bread beside her when she had nothing. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold. the sun reflecting off fresh snow with blinding brilliance. Tessa wrapped herself in her warmest shawl and made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Holloway in the shop's small kitchen, preparing breakfast. "Merry Christmas, dear," the older woman said, handing her a cup of coffee. "Are you excited about your dinner at the Triple R?" "Yes," Tessa admitted, warming her hands on the cup, "though I'm a bit nervous as well. About meeting the ranch hands or about being alone with Sam Turner?" Mrs. Holloway asked with a knowing smile. "Both, I suppose." Tessa sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "Mrs. Holloway, may I ask you something? About Sam, of course. Has he courted many women in town?" The older woman's expression softened. "No, dear. As I told you before, Sam's always been too busy with the ranch for much socializing. There was talk of an arrangement with Judge Harmon's daughter some years back, but nothing came of it. Since then, he's kept mostly to himself." She patted Tessa's hand. "Until you came along." The answer should have reassured her, but instead it raised a new worry. What if he's just being kind? What if he feels responsible for me somehow because of how we met? Tessa Morgan, I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. Trust me when I say the way he looks at you isn't kindness or responsibility." Mrs. Holloway's eyes twinkled. "Now eat your breakfast. You'll need your strength for the day ahead." After breakfast, they exchanged small gifts, a hand-knitted scarf from Mrs. Holloway and an embroidered handkerchief Tessa had made in secret evening hours. Then it was time to prepare for her visit to the Triple R. Tessa dressed carefully in her best day dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned her hair in a simple but becoming style. As a gift for Sam, she had baked a batch of gingerbread, his favorite, wrapped in a cloth and tucked into a basket along with a hand-stitched handkerchief with his initials. At precisely noon, there was a knock at the shop door. Sam stood outside with a sleigh instead of his usual horse, the runners gleaming in the sunlight. "Merry Christmas," he said, his smile warming her despite the cold. "I thought the sleigh would be more comfortable than riding, given the snow." The Triple R lay 5 miles outside of town, a sprawling ranch nestled in a valley between rolling hills. As they approached, Tessa could see a large main house built of sturdy logs, smoke curling from its chimney, flanked by a barn and several outbuildings. Even in winter, it had a prosperous, well-tended look that spoke of hard work and careful management. "It's beautiful," she said as Sam helped her from the sleigh. "Thank you. It's not much compared to some of the fancy places back east, but it's home." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Inside, the house was warm and inviting, decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons. A massive Christmas tree dominated one corner of the main room, adorned with candles and simple ornaments. "The hands won't be joining us until supper," Sam explained as he took her coat. "I thought you might like to see the ranch first." He gave her a tour of the house, the kitchen with its large hearth, the dining room with a table that could seat 20, the library filled with books that had belonged to his parents. Upstairs were bedrooms, including the master chamber that had been his parents' and was now his, simply furnished but comfortable. "It's a big house for one person," Tessa observed as they returned downstairs. "Yes," Sam agreed, his eyes meeting hers briefly. "Too big sometimes." The afternoon passed pleasantly, as Sam showed her around the ranch, the barn with its horses and cattle sheltered from the winter cold, the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived, the smokehouse and root cellar that stored food for the winter months. "You're very self-sufficient here," Tessa remarked as they walked back to the main house, the sun beginning to dip toward the horizon. "We have to be. Town's too far to rely on for everyday needs, especially in winter." He glanced at her, a hint of vulnerability in his expression. Does it seem too isolated to you? The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. Tessa considered carefully before answering. No, she said honestly. It feels peaceful, protected. His smile told her she had given the right answer. By the time they returned to the house, the ranch hands had begun to gather 8 men of varying ages, all clearly respectful of Sam and curious about his guest. They were unfailingly polite to Tessa, though she could sense their unspoken questions. Dinner was a festive affair: roast beef, potatoes, vegetables from the root cellar, and pies that the ranch cook, an older man named Charlie, had prepared with evident pride. The conversation flowed easily, the men sharing stories and jokes that kept everyone laughing. As Tessa observed Sam with his men, she saw yet another side of him: a natural leader who commanded respect without demanding it, who knew each man's story and family situation, who treated them not as employees but as an extended family. After dinner came singing and small gifts exchanged among the hands. Sam presented each man with a new shirt and a bonus, receiving hearty thanks and good-natured ribbing in return. When the hands finally retired to the bunkhouse, full of food and holiday cheer, Sam and Tessa were left alone by the fire. "Thank you for including me," Tessa said, watching the flames dance in the hearth. "This has been the loveliest Christmas I can remember. I'm glad." Sam moved from his chair to sit beside her on the sofa. "I have something for you." From his pocket, he withdrew a small package wrapped in silver paper. Tessa opened it carefully to find a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. "Sam, it's beautiful," she breathed, touching it gently. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a tiny pressed flower, a prairie rose, she realized. "From our picnic," Sam explained. "The first time I felt like maybe you could care for me too." Tears pricked at Tessa's eyes. "I do care for you, Sam, more than I ever thought possible." He took her hand in his expression serious. "Tessa, I know you've been hurt. I don't know all the details and you don't have to tell me until you're ready, but I want you to know that I would never hurt you. Not ever." The sincerity in his voice broke something open inside her, a wall she had built around her heart after William's betrayals and cruelty. "My husband," she began haltingly, "was not a good man. He married me for my father's money, what little there was of it. When that was gone, She swallowed hard. "He changed, became cruel. He drank, gambled, had affairs. When I threatened to leave, he beat me." Sam's hand tightened on hers, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "He was killed in a dispute over a card game. The other man's wife found out they were involved. Her husband shot William when he discovered them together." Tessa closed her eyes, remembering the shame of those days. "The scandal was terrible. Everyone knew, everyone talked. I couldn't stay in St. Louis after that." "So you came west," Sam said softly. "Yes. To start over where no one knew my name or my story." She looked up at him, vulnerability in her eyes. Does it change how you see me?" "Only to make me admire your strength even more," he replied without hesitation, "and to make me wish I could have protected you from such pain." The tenderness in his voice undid her completely. Tears spilled down her cheeks as months of pent-up fear and loneliness finally found release. Sam gathered her gently into his arms, holding her as she cried, one hand stroking her hair soothingly. When the storm of emotion had passed, she remained in his embrace, feeling safer than she had in years. "Tessa," he said finally, his voice low, "I love you. I think I started falling in love with you that very first day, when I saw you sleeping on those steps, so vulnerable yet so dignified even in your distress." She pulled back slightly to look at his face, scarcely daring to believe what she was hearing. "I don't expect you to feel the same," he continued. "I know it's too soon and after what you've been through, but I wanted you to know. I love you, and I'll wait as long as it takes for you to be ready. If you think you could ever—" Tessa stopped his words with a finger to his lips. "Sam Turner, I love you too. It terrifies me how much I love you, but I do." The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, reverently, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so gentle it brought fresh tears to her eyes. When they finally parted, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "I never want to spend another Christmas without you," he whispered. "Nor I without you," she replied, her heart fuller than she had ever thought possible. That night, as Sam drove her back to town in the moonlight, the stars brilliant overhead and the runners of the sleigh whispering over fresh snow, Tessa felt as though her life had come full circle. From despair to hope, from loneliness to love, from sleeping on the back steps of a store to sitting beside the man who had saved her with an act of simple kindness. As January settled over Silver Creek, bringing the coldest days of winter, the relationship between Tessa and Sam blossomed despite the frost. Sam rode into town several times a week, sometimes just for a brief visit at the dress shop, other times to take Tessa for dinner at the hotel restaurant, or to attend church services together on Sundays. Their growing attachment did not go unnoticed in the small community. Most regarded it with approval. Sam was well respected, and Tessa had proven herself a hard worker and a skilled seamstress. There were a few raised eyebrows among those who considered a ranch foreman beneath the notice of even a modest dressmaker, but such opinions remained largely unspoken in Sam's presence. One snowy afternoon in late January, Tessa was alone in the shop, working on a complex bodice pattern when the bell above the door jingled. Looking up, she expected to see Sam, but instead found herself facing a smartly dressed woman she had never seen before. "Good afternoon," Tessa greeted her, setting aside her work. "Welcome to Holloway's. How may I help you?" The woman removed her gloves slowly, surveying the shop with an air of critical assessment. She was perhaps 40, with sharp features and hair the same sandy shade as Sam's, though styled in an elaborate Eastern fashion. "I'm looking for Miss Tessa Morgan," she said, her accent distinctly cultured. "I'm Tessa Morgan." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. I am Emma Thornton, Sam Turner's sister." Tessa's heart skipped a beat. Sam had mentioned his sister was coming for a visit, but not that she would arrive so soon. "Mrs. Thornton, it's a pleasure to meet you," Tessa said, extending her hand. "Sam has spoken of you often. Has he?" Emma Thornton's handshake was brief and cool. "And he has spoken of you as well, Miss Morgan, at great length, in fact. Hence my curiosity to meet the woman who has so captivated my brother." There was something in her tone that put Tessa immediately on guard. "Sam didn't mention you would be arriving today. A slight change of plans. The weather in Denver was turning, so I caught an earlier train." She moved around the shop, fingering fabrics and examining the dresses on display. "This is quaint." "Thank you," Tessa replied, choosing to ignore the implied criticism. "Mrs. Holloway has owned this shop for 20 years. I've only been here since October." "Yes, Sam mentioned you were new to the area." Emma turned to face her directly. "Where did you say you were from, Miss Morgan?" "St. Louis." "And what brought you all the way to this charming little settlement?" The questioning felt like an interrogation, but Tessa kept her composure. "I was traveling to Sacramento to stay with relatives when circumstances required me to stop here." "Circumstances?" Emma prompted. "Personal ones," Tessa replied firmly. A tense silence fell between them. Finally, Emma sighed. "Miss Morgan, I'll be direct. My brother is an important man in this territory. The Triple R is one of the largest ranches in the county, and Sam has worked too hard building it to risk complications." "I'm not sure I understand what you're implying, Mrs. Thornton." I think you do. Emma's gaze was piercing. Women like you alone with mysterious pasts often seek out men of means. My brother is trusting to a fault. He sees the good in everyone, even when it isn't there. The accusation stung like a slap. Mrs. Thornton, I assure you, I have never sought anything from your brother except his friendship. Perhaps not deliberately. But you must see how it appears a woman with no connections, no family present, suddenly the focus of attention from one of the most eligible men in the territory. Tessa felt heat rising in her cheeks, anger mingling with humiliation. I think you should leave, Mrs. Thornton. This conversation is inappropriate. The truth often is. Emma pulled her gloves back on with deliberate movements. I only want what's best for my brother. If your intentions are as pure as you claim, you'll understand my concern. I understand that you love your brother, Tessa said, fighting to keep her voice steady. But you don't know me, and you have no right to judge me based on assumptions. Emma regarded her thoughtfully. Perhaps not, but I do intend to learn more about you, Miss Morgan, a great deal more. With that ominous promise, she turned and left the shop, the bell jangling discordantly in her wake. Tessa sank onto her stool, hands trembling. The encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Emma Thornton clearly had resources and connections. What if she discovered the truth about William's death and the scandal that had followed? Would she use it to drive Tessa away from Sam? The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of worry. By closing time, Tessa had resolved to speak to Sam directly about his sister's visit. She would not allow fear to drive her into hiding the truth, not again. She was just locking up when Sam himself appeared, his face alight with excitement. Tessa, I've been looking for you. Emma arrived early. She's at the ranch now. I want you to come to dinner tomorrow night to meet her properly. The irony of the situation would have been comical if it weren't so nerve-wracking. Actually, Sam, your sister and I have already met. She came to the shop this afternoon. His smile faltered. She did. Why didn't she tell me? I think she wanted to form her own impression first. Tessa chose her words carefully. Sam, I don't think she approves of me. Nonsense, he said dismissively. Emma's just protective. Once she gets to know you, she'll love you as much as I do. Tessa wasn't so sure, but she couldn't bear to dampen his enthusiasm. I hope you're right. So you'll come to dinner tomorrow, please? I want the two most important women in my life to become friends. How could she refuse when he looked at her with such hope? Of course I'll come. His smile returned full force. Wonderful, I'll send the sleigh for you at 6. He kissed her cheek quickly. Don't worry about Emma. She's all bark and no bite, I promise. As she watched him stride away, Tessa wished she could share his confidence. Something told her that Emma Thornton could bite quite effectively when she chose to. The following evening, Tessa dressed with particular care, selecting a burgundy dress that Mrs. Holloway assured her was both fashionable and appropriate. She arranged her hair in a sophisticated style she had learned from a ladies' magazine, hoping to present an image of confidence and respectability. The sleigh arrived precisely at 6, driven by one of the Triple R hands. The ride to the ranch seemed much shorter than usual, giving Tessa too little time to prepare herself for the coming confrontation. Sam greeted her at the door with a warm embrace. You look beautiful, he murmured, helping her with her coat. And don't worry, I've told Emma to be on her best behavior. Emma was waiting in the parlor, elegantly attired in a deep green gown that made Tessa's own careful ensemble seem provincial by comparison. She rose as they entered, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Miss Morgan, how lovely to see you again, she said, extending her hand. I hope we can begin afresh after our somewhat awkward introduction yesterday. I would like that, Tessa replied, accepting the offered hand and the temporary truce it represented. Dinner began pleasantly enough, with Sam keeping the conversation flowing, telling stories of their childhood that had Emma reluctantly smiling and occasionally correcting his recollections. Tessa began to relax slightly, thinking perhaps the evening would pass without incident after all. It was over dessert that Emma struck. "Miss Morgan, Sam tells me you were widowed recently. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Tessa replied cautiously. "What was your husband's profession, if I may ask?" Sam frowned. "Emma, is this really appropriate dinner conversation?" "It's just friendly interest, Sam," Emma said innocently. "I'm trying to get to know your friend." Tessa laid her napkin beside her plate. "It's all right, Sam. My husband was in finance, Mrs. Thornton, though not very successfully, I'm afraid." "I see. And your family in St. Louis, are they in business as well?" "My father was a teacher. He passed away several years ago. My mother was a dressmaker like me." "Was?" Emma prompted. "She died shortly after my father." "How unfortunate. So there's really no one back in St. Louis who might miss you. Wonder where you've gone." The implication was clear. Emma was probing for connections, for anyone who might verify Tessa's story. Before Tessa could respond, Sam intervened. "That's enough, Emma. Tessa is here as our guest, not to be interrogated." "I'm merely showing interest in the woman my brother seems so enamored with," Emma replied, her tone hardening. "Surely that's reasonable, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" Sam demanded. "A woman appears out of nowhere with a convenient story about traveling to relatives who never materialize, no family to speak of, no connections anyone can verify." "Stop it," Sam interrupted, his voice sharp. "Tessa has been nothing but honest with me about her past." "Has she?" Emma turned her gaze to Tessa. "Then perhaps she's told you exactly how her husband died, and why she really left St. Louis." The blood drained from Tessa's face. Somehow, in the short time since their meeting, Emma had discovered at least part of the truth. Sam looked between them, confusion evident in his expression. "Tessa, what is she talking about?" Tessa's hands trembled in her lap. This was not how she had wanted this conversation to happen, but she would not lie not to Sam. "My husband was shot and killed," she said quietly. "By the husband of a woman he was involved with." Sam's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "You never mentioned that." "I was ashamed," Tessa admitted, tears threatening. "Not of what he did, I had no control over that, but of how people treated me afterward. As if I were somehow responsible or tainted by association. The scandal was unbearable." "So you ran away," Emma interjected, triumph in her voice. "Changed your name, perhaps?" "No," Tessa said firmly. "I've always been Tessa Morgan. I left St. Louis because I couldn't bear the whispers, the judgment. I wanted to start over somewhere people didn't look at me and see only my husband's sins." Sam was silent, his expression unreadable. The weight of his silence pressed on Tessa's heart like a stone. "I think," Emma said into the stillness, "that it would be best if Miss Morgan returned to town now. Sam and I have much to discuss." "No," Sam said suddenly, his voice steady. "Tessa stays. You and I have nothing to discuss about this, Emma." "Sam, be reasonable. You barely know this woman. She's admitted to lying. She didn't lie. She chose not to share painful details of her past until she was ready. There's a difference." He moved to Tessa's side, taking her hand in his. "And I know everything I need to know about her character." Emma's face flushed with anger. "You're being naive. What else might she be hiding? Have you even considered that? What about her so-called relatives in Sacramento? Do they even exist?" "They do," Tessa said quietly. "My cousin Margaret and her husband. I wrote to them when I arrived here, explaining that I had run out of funds for the journey but had found employment. They replied that I was welcome to stay with them whenever I could make the trip." "Convenient," Emma scoffed, "and unprovable." "Actually," Sam interrupted. "I've seen the letters. Tessa showed them to me weeks ago." This revelation clearly caught Emma off guard. She looked between them, her certainty faltering. "Emma," Sam continued, his voice softening, "I understand your concern. But Tessa has been nothing but good and honest and hardworking since the day she arrived in Silver Creek. She's respected by everyone who knows her. And I love her." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Emma's expression shifted, resignation replacing anger. "You really do, don't you?" she said finally. "Yes, more than I thought possible," Emma sighed deeply. "I only wanted to protect you, Sam, after all you've accomplished, all you've built here." "I know, and I love you for it," Sam smiled at his sister. "But I don't need protection from Tessa. If anything, she's made everything I've built finally feel worthwhile." The tension in the room gradually dissipated as Emma reluctantly accepted that her brother's mind was made up. The remainder of the evening passed in a strained but civil atmosphere, with Emma making visible efforts to be more welcoming toward Tessa. As the evening drew to a close, Emma surprised them both by apologizing directly to Tessa. "I was too quick to judge," she admitted. "It seems my brotherly instincts sometimes override my manners." "I understand," Tessa replied, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. "Family is precious. You're fortunate to have each other." Something in her words must have resonated with Emma, for her expression softened. "Perhaps, in time, we might be fortunate enough to have you as family as well, Miss Morgan." The implication wasn't lost on either Tessa or Sam, whose ears reddened visibly at his sister's words. Later, as Sam drove Tessa back to town in the sleigh, a comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the soft jingling of the harness bells. "I'm sorry about Emma," Sam said finally. "She means well, I know, and she's right to be protective of you." He glanced at her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Were you ever going to tell me about how your husband died?" Tessa nodded. "Yes, I wanted to. That day at Christmas I almost did, but I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you would see me differently. That the scandal would matter to you." Sam shook his head firmly. "Tessa, nothing about your past could change how I feel about you. Nothing." "I believe you," she said softly. "Now." As they approached the town, Sam suddenly pulled the sleigh to a halt on a rise overlooking Silver Creek. The night was clear, the stars brilliant overhead, the town below a scatter of warm lights in the darkness. "Why are we stopping?" Tessa asked. Sam turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Because there's something I need to say, and I don't want to wait any longer to say it." Her heart began to race as he continued. "Tessa Morgan, from the moment I saw you on those steps behind the store, something in me recognized something in you. I didn't understand it then, but I do now." He squeezed her hands gently. "I love you, not just parts of you, all of you. Your strength, your kindness, your determination. The way you rebuilt your life from nothing, the way you make me laugh, the way you make this wild, empty land feel like home in a way it never has before." Tears welled in Tessa's eyes as Sam reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I know it hasn't been long, and if you need more time, I'll wait. But I don't want to spend another day wondering if you might someday be my wife." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "Tessa Morgan, will you marry me?" For a moment, Tessa couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotion. Then, through her tears, she smiled. "Yes, Sam Turner. Yes, I will marry you." His answering smile outshone the stars as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he gathered her into his arms and kissed her a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and protection, of partnership and passion. When they finally continued their journey into town, Tessa felt as though she were floating, the weight of her past finally lifting from her shoulders. The future stretched before them, bright with promise. News of their engagement spread quickly through Silver Creek. Mrs. Holloway was among the first to offer congratulations, embracing Tessa with genuine affection. "I knew it from the moment he started coming around with those ridiculous excuses to see you," she said, wiping away a tear. "That boy was smitten, plain as day." Even Emma, before departing for Boston, had given her reluctant blessing. "Take care of him," she had said to Tessa, her tone softened by resignation. "He deserves to be happy." "I will," Tessa had promised, "with everything I have." As February turned to March and the first hints of spring began to soften the landscape, wedding plans took shape. They decided on a simple ceremony in April, when the wildflowers would be in bloom. Tessa began work on her wedding dress, ivory silk with delicate lace that Mrs. Holloway insisted on ordering specially from San Francisco. "It's my gift to you," the older woman said when Tessa protested the expense. "Consider it payment for all the extra business your fine stitching has brought to my shop." One evening in late March, as Tessa was closing the shop, Sam appeared with an unexpected request. "Ride out to the ranch with me," he urged. "There's something I want to show you." "Curious," Tessa agreed. The ride was pleasant in the mild spring air, the hills beginning to green after the long winter. As they approached the Triple R, Sam led her not toward the main house but along a side trail that wound through a stand of cottonwoods toward a small rise. As they crested the hill, Tessa gasped. There, in a sheltered hollow with a view of both the mountains and the ranch house, stood a small cabin newly built, its logs still pale against the darkening sky. "Sam, what is this?" he smiled, helping her down from her horse. "Our home, if you like it." "Our home," she repeated, stunned. "But what about the main house?" "It's too big for just the two of us," he explained, leading her toward the cabin. "And too full of my parents' memories. I thought we might want a place that's just ours, at least to start." He looked at her anxiously. "What do you think?" Tessa was speechless as they entered. The cabin was simple but beautifully crafted, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and a dining space. A doorway led to a bedroom, and stairs climbed to what appeared to be a loft above. "The men and I have been working on it since January," Sam explained. "I wanted it to be ready before the wedding." "It's perfect," Tessa whispered, turning to face him. "Absolutely perfect." The relief and joy on his face warmed her heart. He had built this with his own hands for their future together. No one had ever given her such a gift. "There's one more thing," Sam said, taking her hand and leading her back outside. Behind the cabin was a small additional structure. "I know how much you love sewing, and Mrs. Holloway mentioned you once dreamed of your own shop." He opened the door to reveal a light-filled space with windows on 3 sides, empty now but clearly designed as a workroom. "Your own dress shop," he said softly, "here at the ranch. You could take commissions from town, work as much or as little as you want." Tears filled Tessa's eyes as the full impact of his thoughtfulness struck her. He had truly listened to her dreams, and found a way to make them possible without asking her to choose between her work and their life together. "I don't know what to say," she managed finally. "Say you'll be happy here," he replied simply. "I already am," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible." Their wedding day dawned clear and mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of spring across the land. Tessa dressed in her finished gown, Mrs. Holloway fussing over every detail like a mother preparing her daughter. "Something borrowed," the older woman said, fastening a pearl brooch to Tessa's bodice. "It was my mother's." "It's beautiful," Tessa said, touching it gently. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Holloway. For giving me a chance when I had nothing, for your kindness for—" She faltered, emotion overwhelming her. "None of that now," Mrs. Holloway said briskly, though her own eyes were suspiciously bright. "You'll ruin your complexion with tears. Besides, I should be thanking you. You've brought light back into that boy's life, and this town is better for it." The church was filled with townspeople and ranch hands. All turned to watch as Tessa walked down the aisle on the arm of Charlie, the Triple R cook, who had proudly agreed to give her away. But Tessa saw only Sam, waiting for her at the altar, his face alight with love and promise. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows spoken clearly for all to hear. When Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife, Sam's kiss was both tender and possessive, a declaration to the world that they belonged to each other now and always. The celebration afterward at the Triple R was joyous music and dancing, food and laughter lasting well into the evening. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sam led Tessa away from the festivities toward their new cabin. "Mrs. Turner," he said as they reached the door, "welcome home." With a laugh of pure happiness, Tessa found herself swept into his arms as he carried her across the threshold into their new life together. Later, lying in his arms in their bed, watching moonlight spill through the window, Tessa marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From the depths of despair on those back steps of Finley's store to this moment of perfect contentment, it seemed almost too miraculous to be real. "What are you thinking?" Sam murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I never expected to be this happy," she admitted. "After William, I thought that part of my life was over, that the best I could hope for was safety and solitude." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And now I know better. Now I know that true love doesn't diminish you, it makes you more completely yourself than you ever thought possible." "Mrs. Tessa Turner, philosopher," Sam teased gently. She smiled against his chest. "Mrs. Tessa Turner, seamstress, and wife, and hopefully someday mother." His arms tightened around her at that. "I would like that very much." "So would I," she whispered. "A family of our own." Outside, the moon sailed high above the Triple R, its light blessing the land and the new life beginning in the small cabin on the hill. The seasons turned, summer following spring in a blaze of wildflowers and long, golden evenings. Tessa settled into life at the Triple R as naturally as if she had always been there. Her days fell into a pleasant rhythm, mornings spent helping with ranch chores or working in their vegetable garden, afternoons in her sewing room where she continued to take commissions from townspeople who didn't mind the ride out to the ranch for her skilled handiwork. Sam thrived with Tessa by his side. The ranch hands noted with approval how their boss seemed more relaxed, more inclined to join them for meals in the bunkhouse, more ready with a smile or a joke than in the years since his parents' passing. "Never seen the boss so happy," Charlie remarked to Tessa one day as they worked together in the kitchen, preparing a feast for the hands after a successful cattle drive. "It's like the ranch itself is breathing easier." Tessa smiled, kneading bread dough with flour-covered hands. "He makes me happy too, Charlie. You two were meant for each other, plain as day," the old cook said with a nod. "Like it was all arranged by something bigger than any of us." As summer faded into autumn, Tessa began to suspect that something indeed had been arranged, though not quite in the way Charlie meant. The first signs were subtle: a sudden aversion to the coffee she usually enjoyed, unexpected tiredness in the afternoons, a tenderness in her body that hadn't been there before. She kept her suspicions to herself at first, not wanting to raise Sam's hopes until she was certain. But by late September, there could be no doubt. She was carrying their child. Tessa chose a perfect moment to share the news, a quiet evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. Sam had his arm around her, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder. "Sam," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." He looked down at her, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You sound serious." "It is serious," she replied, taking his hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Sam stared at her, uncomprehending. Then understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a joy so pure it took her breath away. "A baby," he whispered. "You're sure?" Tessa nodded, her own eyes filling with happy tears. "In spring, around April, I think." Sam pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious glass. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." The months of waiting passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. The loft in their cabin was transformed into a nursery, with a cradle that Sam crafted himself from cottonwood, and quilts that Tessa stitched in the quietude of winter evenings. The entire ranch seemed to hold its breath in expectation, the hands taking special care of the boss's missus whenever she ventured from the cabin. Mrs. Holloway visited often, bringing baby clothes and practical advice. "My sister had 6, she told Tessa during one such visit. "Healthy as horses, all of them. You'll do fine, dear." Emma sent gifts from Boston, fine blankets and tiny garments that Tessa suspected cost more than a ranch hand's monthly wage. With them came a letter that made Tessa smile through tears. "It seems I am to be an aunt. Please accept these tokens along with my sincere wishes for your health and happiness. Sam's letters speak of nothing but you and the coming child. I have never known my brother to be so content. For that alone, you have my eternal gratitude." As Tessa's body changed, Sam's attentiveness only increased. He insisted on taking over the heavier chores, watched her like a hawk for signs of fatigue, and spent every evening with his hand resting gently on her growing belly, marveling at the movements of their child. "I never knew I could love someone who isn't even here yet," he confessed one night as they lay in bed, his hand splayed protectively over the place where their baby had just kicked. "I know," Tessa agreed, covering his hand with her own. "It's like my heart has grown to make room." The spring of 1879 arrived with gentle rains, and newborn calves dotting the green pastures of the Triple R. As April dawned, Tessa felt the first stirrings of labor one quiet afternoon while arranging wildflowers on their kitchen table. Sam was out checking fence lines with 2 of the hands when Charlie came pounding on the door, summoned by Tessa's message with one of the younger ranch boys. "Don't you worry, Mrs. Turner," the old cook said firmly as he helped her to bed. "I've sent for the doctor and for Sam. They'll be here soon enough." The labor progressed slowly at first, giving Sam time to return, white-faced with concern, and Dr. Peterson time to arrive from town. As the hours passed and the pain intensified, Tessa clung to Sam's hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. "You're doing beautifully," Dr. Peterson assured her as evening deepened into night. "Everything is progressing just as it should." Outside the cabin, the ranch hands gathered, maintaining a quiet vigil. Charlie kept them supplied with coffee, and his special whiskey-laced apple pie, a tradition he claimed had seen the Triple R through every crisis since before Sam was born. Just as dawn was breaking over the eastern mountains, with a final heroic effort from Tessa and encouragement from both Sam and the doctor, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that seemed to shake the very rafters of the cabin. "A girl, Doctor," Peterson announced, his weathered face creasing in a smile as he placed the squirming, red-faced infant on Tessa's chest. "A perfect little girl." Sam stared at the tiny being in wonder, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "She's beautiful," he whispered, touching a finger to his daughter's clenched fist. Just like her mother. Tessa gazed down at their child, overwhelmed by a love so fierce and protective it almost frightened her. "Hello, little one," she murmured. "We've been waiting for you." They named her Hope for all she represented in their lives, for the journey that had brought them together, for the future they now shared. News of Hope's birth spread quickly through Silver Creek and beyond. Visitors came bearing gifts and good wishes. Mrs. Holloway with a christening gown she had secretly been sewing for months. Reverend Miller with a small silver cup engraved with Hope's name and birth date. Even Emma, who arrived unannounced from Boston 2 weeks after the birth, laden with presents and determined to meet her niece. "She has the Turner eyes," Emma declared, holding Hope with unexpected tenderness. "But your chin, I think, Tessa." "She has her father wrapped around her tiny finger already," Tessa replied with a smile, watching Sam hover anxiously nearby, ready to reclaim his daughter at the slightest sign of distress. "As it should be," Emma said approvingly. Then, more softly, "Thank you, Tessa." "For what?" "For giving my brother this happiness. For making the Triple R a home again." The months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joy-filled days as Hope grew from a newborn to an infant, and then to a curious, determined baby who crawled after the ranch cats and laughed at the antics of the cowboys who adored her. On a warm afternoon in late summer, just over a year after Hope's birth, Tessa sat on a blanket beneath the cottonwood tree near their cabin, watching Sam play with their daughter. Hope's delighted squeals filled the air as he swung her gently in his strong arms, her dark curls so like Tessa's own bouncing with each movement. Looking at them, Tessa felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. From that desperate day on the back steps of Finley's store to this moment of perfect contentment, the journey seemed both miraculous and inevitable, as if every step had been leading her home. Sam noticed her watching and carried Hope over to join her on the blanket. "What's that smile about, Mrs. Turner?" he asked, settling beside her with their daughter on his lap. "I was just thinking about bread," Tessa replied, reaching out to smooth Hope's wild curls. "Bread?" Sam repeated, puzzled. "Yes, the bread you left beside me that day, how something so simple changed everything." She met his eyes, her own full of love. "If you hadn't stopped that night." "But I did," he said simply, taking her hand in his. "And I always will." Hope reached for her mother with chubby hands, babbling happily as Tessa gathered her close. The three of them sat together in the dappled shade, a family forged from kindness and courage, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the land that had brought them together. In the years that followed, the Triple R prospered under Sam's careful management, expanding its boundaries and its reputation as one of the finest ranches in the territory. Tessa's dress shop, first established in the small building behind their cabin, grew into a thriving business with a second location in Silver Creek itself, managed by a young woman Tessa had trained in the art of fine sewing. Hope was joined by two brothers, Samuel Jr., born 2 years after her, and Michael, who arrived 3 years later. The Turner children grew up surrounded by love and laughter, learning the ways of the ranch alongside their lessons in reading and writing, which Tessa insisted were equally important. Silver Creek grew as well, transforming from a rough mining town into a respectable community with a proper school, a bank, and even a small theater where traveling shows sometimes performed. Mrs. Holloway eventually retired, selling her shop to Tessa and moving into a comfortable house that Sam helped her acquire at a suspiciously reasonable price. Through it all, Sam and Tessa's love only deepened, weathering the inevitable storms of life, drought years that tested the ranch's resources, childhood illnesses that kept them awake with worry, the occasional disagreements that come to all partnerships with the same strength and commitment that had first drawn them together. On a crisp autumn day in 1889, almost exactly 10 years after their first meeting, Sam and Tessa stood on the porch of their cabin, expanded now to accommodate their growing family, watching their children play with the newest litter of barn kittens. "You ever think about how it all began?" Sam asked, his arm around Tessa's waist, holding her close against the evening chill. "Often," she admitted, leaning into his familiar warmth. "Especially on days like today, when everything seems so perfect it's hard to believe it's real." "It's real," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Though I sometimes wonder what made me stop that night. I'd ridden past that spot 100 times before." Tessa turned in his arms to face him, her eyes as bright and clear as they had been the day he first truly saw her. "Perhaps it was fate. Perhaps," he agreed, smiling down at her. "Or perhaps it was simply that I recognized something in you that I'd been looking for my whole life without knowing it." "And what was that?" she asked softly. "Home," he said simply. "You were my home, Tessa. You still are." As the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors that had witnessed their love's beginning, Tessa stood in the circle of her husband's arms, surrounded by the life they had built together from a single act of kindness bred left beside a sleeping woman on the back steps of a store. It was enough. It had always been enough, and it always would be.